Today I want to talk about the battle theme for a boss from Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door named... Excuse me. His name is... I can't say it. This boss fight and the surrounding chapter is one of the great moments in a game filled with great moments, so I won't spoil any of the game's big surprises for you. But if you're extra sensitive to spoilers and you want to go into this section completely blind, maybe give this video a miss until you beat Chapter 4 of the game. The boss in question, Dupless, is found terrorizing the small and depressing Twilight Town, turning one of the villagers into a pig at random every time the bell tolls from the top of Creepy Steeple. Mario and his crew must infiltrate the haunted cathedral, make their way up to the top of the tower, and face off against the villain to save the villagers from a very muddy fate. The music captures the setting of the fight, the boss's character, and the tone of the chapter perfectly, all while delivering on the blood-pumping action and excitement you'd want for a boss fight. So without further ado, let's go. To set the scene for a battle in a haunted cathedral, the track opens with an appropriately spooky, swelling polychord. It's a C-augmented triad over top of an A-augmented triad. The augmented triad, a major triad with the fifth bumped up a half step, is an unnerving, alien sort of sound. It's a symmetrical shape, made up entirely of major third intervals, and this kind of perfect symmetry in music always ends up sounding pretty gross. I guess beauty in nature is never perfectly even or symmetrical. Adding to the unnatural quality of the augmented triad is the dissonance of stacking two clashing triads on top of each other. Being a symmetrical chord means that each augmented triad is actually three different augmented triads in one. The notes that make up C augmented also make up E augmented and A flat augmented. The notes that make up A augmented also make up C sharp augmented and F augmented. So stacking a C augmented triad on top of an A augmented triad is like stacking an A flat augmented on top of an A augmented. They're a semitone apart, and so we get lots of clashing notes between these two chords. Swelling in volume before being abruptly cut off has this great, creepy, dangerous horror movie quality that perfectly sets up the setting for the battle. After this, the main boss music comes in at a simmer, starting off with this plucky synth line and sparse bass establishing our A minor key center while the chiming of bells rings out over top. The bells are such a nice touch, a subtle way to weave an element of Dupless's character into the music. You might catch yourself wondering who's going to be turned into a pig this time, each time this section loops. Now, this plucky synth line brings in one of the main elements of Dupless's battle music, and a common element across Thousand Year Door's soundtrack as a whole, chromatic decoration. This line is centered around the fifth of the key, E, but uses the notes a semitone on either side of it, F and D sharp, to decorate this fifth, and add an element that's both spooky and playful. My previous video on Thousand Year Door's music was all about how the game uses chromatic notes to create a silly kind of feeling. How these types of notes, while dissonant on their own, add a playful element to the music when they're resolved properly. This feeling is leveraged in Dupless's battle theme for sure, but it's combined with the minor key and other dissonant choices to create a slightly different palette. With the bouncy staccato rhythm here, I'd say the vibe being achieved is something like a creepy circus. We get the sense that Dupless is having fun at our expense, but more on this later. The first section starts at a simmer but slowly builds up in intensity. After a couple of bars, this winding 16th note line sneaks in, decorating the tonic A note with the scalar note above and the note a semitone below. And then one more swell of our double augmented polychord brings us to a high energy groove. The bass line is much more busy, the two busy chromatic lines play off of each other, and these rhythmic orchestra hit samples on top give us a much slower chromatic decoration of the tonic, moving down from A to G sharp and back on a bar-by-bar basis. This break on the last bar of the section really seals the deal on the circus-y quality of the music. It starts on the tonic A, then descends chromatically to the 5th, E, before running chromatically down to D and back. This is very evocative of Julius Fučík's famous march Entrance of the Gladiators, which you may recognize as that circus music. The melody to Entrance of the Gladiators is based entirely on the chromatic scale, but carefully resolves the notes from outside of the key to achieve the challenging feat of creating a piece that sounds pleasant and has a clear key center while also using entirely chromatic motion. This was an effort done by Fučík to show off the then cutting-edge technology that allowed all brass instruments to play every note in the chromatic scale. Earlier music used horns and trumpets and other brass built to play in specific keys, but now those shackles could be thrown off and the whole world of 12 tones was open to everyone. The effect of basing melodies off of the chromatic scale like this is a very goofy atmosphere, but judging by the name Fučík chose for the piece, this association was probably lost on him. Unfortunately for him, music is objective, so in the years since its composition, this piece has come to be associated with circus clowns and nothing else. This circus-y association is evoked by the same chromatic approach to melody in Duplass's battle theme, and it fits Duplass's character really well. He's not a clown, but he's clearly terrorizing Twilight Town for his own amusement. He's a master of disguise, he's playful, he certainly has tricks up his sleeve, and, as I said before, combined with the dark minor harmony and aggressive nature of the battle theme, the music gives us the picture of a bully. Someone who's having fun at your expense, who's amusing himself by hurting other people. Anyways, this circus-y breakdown carries us into the biggest, most intense section of the piece, which switches to instrument colors that evoke the dark cathedral in which this battle takes place. Blazing fast organ 16th notes and an organ bass line with quiet choir pads interjecting halfway through the section. I'm gonna do a real deep dive on this section because I think it's super cool and it goes by so fast it's easy to miss all the tasty stuff going on. For the first time in the piece, we move away from our A bass note, the two organ lines together implying a quick succession of chords that jump between scales and borrowed notes to overwhelm the listener. The top line is constructed pretty simply and sounds a lot more complicated than it really is. It's mostly walking up the A minor scale, decorating each note with lower neighbor motion, dipping down to the note below and then coming back up, and then finishing off each 4-note chunk with a drop down to an E note, the 5th of the key. This kind of pedaled note, or note that a line keeps jumping back to over and over, is a staple of creepy church organ music. The bass line is where we see a lot of borrowed notes coming in. We start on a clear A minor sound and then move to an implied D to E progression, borrowing F sharp and G sharp notes from outside the key for a classical melodic minor type of sound. This moves into an F natural, which walks down to this D sharp to B pair that outlines the dominant 2 chord of the key, B7, which is a classic creepy music staple. You'll see this chord all over games like Castlevania and Luigi's Mansion and the like. The phrase closes off with a move from A minor to G sharp diminished 7, resolving back to A minor at the start of the next phrase in a very clear way. On the second phrase, we get the sick interplay between the top and bottom voices. The top voice outlines a shift from A minor to D minor, chromatically approaching the D note with its C sharp leading tone, and then giving us an enclosure of the third, F, before doing a broken thirds walk down through the D minor scale until it resolves back to A minor at the end of the phrase. The bass line, on the other hand, moves from A minor to B flat, the flat 2 of the key. This combines with the implied D minor sound above it to make a dark yet colorful B flat major 7, which winds up and down the scale to land on a chromatically embellished E note at the end of the phrase, which wants to rocket us back to our tonic A minor. Using D majors, D minors, B7s, and B flat major 7s all without damaging our sense of A minor as the home key is the harmonic equivalent of using chromatic scale-based melodies. We're decorating the vibe with all these different notes and colors that could potentially clash with each other, but they're used in just the right way to create a new kind of atmosphere. A wild, freewheeling sound propelled by the driving 16th note organ line. The way the section ends on these B diminished arpeggios in both the top line and bass line feels so perfectly creepy, and to bring us back down to a simmer for the final section of the piece. The final section returns to the ideas established in the beginning, building up from a single simmering synth line underneath the ringing of bells by layering more and more chromatic scale-based synth parts on top of each other as the section continues on. This first low synth part sounds like a bubbling cauldron of 16th notes, popping up from the embellished tonic A note to grab these flat fifths and flat sixths, or running up A minor 6 arpeggios. The upper synth part that comes in returns to the bouncy circus rhythm with a melody that descends chromatically from the root to the fifth over top of a counterline that walks slowly up the A minor scale. The original embellished fifth line weaves its way back into the music as we build toward a climax, and these layers all come to a head with another swelling double augmented polychord building into a 1-bar break, when the original chromatically embellished fifth line plays out to bring us back to the start of the loop. This is such a great battle theme, completely evocative of the spooky haunted cathedral where the battle takes place, as playful and devious as the boss you're facing. The layers of different chromatic lines create an aura that's both threatening enough for a boss fight and light enough for a Paper Mario game, never once losing our A minor key center, but deepening it with these different chromatic colors. I could not be more excited for the game's remake, which is probably out already by the time this video comes out, and I hope it lives up to my wildly unrealistic expectations. Thank you so much for watching. Check out my Patreon if you're interested in supporting this channel, and I'll see you all in the next one.